any kind of estimate on the fiscal impact of no fall sports and any sort of short-term and long-term recovery plans?
Well, I guess we really have to determine whether we're going to be able to, have some of these postponed games played in the spring. Our numbers have remained fairly consistent, which I think we shared on the last call, but now obviously we've eliminated a couple of scenarios. So we're probably, Ryan, somewhere in the 50 million to 80 million range of impact, depending on what we're able to do in the spring. So we're exploring all options. Obviously, I think people probably heard about, the exploration that the Pac-12 is doing about some debt option through the league, through the center. We're also exploring some local options, and then we'll have to consider, what other revenue options, creative revenue options there might be, and always cost containment. As we've had a hiring freeze and a spending freeze. We already took a number of personnel actions. We took about 10% of our staff had to do leave without pay, which is a really difficult decision. And the rest of our team, coaches included, took a 10% across the board pay cut, and we suspended all incentives through the fiscal year. So we've already taken a first step, but we'll continue to try to figure out a way to close that gap for this fiscal year and make sure that we're ready to accelerate out of it.
Okay. Next, we will go to James Crepia.
Thanks, Rob. To get into a little bit of the weeds medically, understandable that the Pac-12 Medical Advisory Group clearly had some advice regarding myocarditis. And even this morning, Brian Hainline from the NCAA group had some very strong remarks. What is your understanding as to why there is this discrepancy, though, nationally, in terms of why some medical advisory groups, including from the NCAA, are very concerned, understandably, and while others and other medical experts across the country are not, and point out that myocarditis is rare but still contracted in other viral infections, and they don't necessarily feel it's a stop point at this time for college athletes?
I can't speak to others. What I can speak to the Pac-12 medical group and the experts that have been included in that, both on the infectious disease as well as public health, and then also have pulled in some cardiologist experts. And obviously there was some concern around the impacts or the emerging information and some of the unknowns relative to the cardiac impacts on those who test positive. And when you couple that with the prevalence in our communities, that was a concern for our Pac-12 medical group, as well as the lack of availability of point-of-care rapid result testing. The medical group's advice was, or they put in their report, that we should not move to contact. As we said from the beginning, we were going to be guided by our Pac-12 medical advisory group. We've stuck to that, and the information they provided allowed us to say, we need to hit pause and postpone and take another look about what we can do after January 1.
All right, the next question will go to Matt Preem.
Thanks. Rob, a lot of these decisions we've heard have been made about the health of the student athlete and the others involved in these sports, in particular with football. How can you guys, I guess, play a spring season and then play again in the fall? Does that mean maybe the fall season could be modified as well to make sure that it's done in a healthy manner?
Well, we don't have those details yet, Matt, but we've had a Pac-12 football working group that's done a great job, of football administrators, of league officials, and lots of conversation with football coaches about how we can do different models. And so now we'll pivot to a model that determines what we can do after January 1. Again, what we've done is postpone sports through the calendar year, and that may give us a chance to do something earlier than what would be the spring. If we can do something in January, February, and we truncate that to fewer games, I don't know the exact number, but we'll explore all types of those models. We will obviously keep health and safety at the forefront, we would make sure that there was enough time for rest and recovery before we pivoted to the 21 season. So, it's time for that working group to get back together and start looking at what options are, and health and safety will remain at the forefront of all those conversations.
All right. Next, we will go to Andrew Hobner.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, Rob. Just two quick questions. A lot of people are looking at, an 8-figure impact financially across athletic departments. But what, first of all, does that actually look like? What does a $50 to $80 million impact look like for you guys over the course of the next 1 to 5 fiscal years moving forward? And the second question is, season ticket holders got, an email last night about the 3 options that they have. Some ticket holders reached out to us with a concern that if they refunded their tickets, the incentives for others to remain would jump them in the priority list. Do ticket holders who decide to refund retain their priority spot, or are they in danger of being jumped by people who get the incentives to either stay around or go on credit for the next year?
So the answer to the first question is, it will depend on how we formulate to cover that gap. Obviously, if you take on debt, it will depend on the terms of that debt and, what we can do on the cost containment side and what opportunities there are on the revenue side. For us, if somebody decides to get a refund, they will retain their season ticket renewal rights. Our priority point system is always changing based on gifts and purchases. It's very fluid, and it has always been that way. But if somebody decides to get a refund, they will retain their season ticket rights for the 21 season.
Okay, next we will go to AJ Jacobson.
So hopefully you're able to hear me, Rob.
I got you. Yep, I can hear you.
Awesome. What accommodations are being made for student athletes who want to remain on campus and train in the facilities here? Or, what's the situation with those guys in this sort of interim time before camps and training start back up?
We will be able to keep them in the status quo, which, as you know, we were in the 20 hours of CARA, which involved some strength and conditioning, some walkthroughs, as well as some film review, all, socially distanced in the weight room with masks, as well as in the film review. So I think what, many of our coaches have decided is to make that optional for student athletes at this point. And we'll continue to provide, the support, obviously the scholarship support, the mental health support, the medical support, as well as continue with the safety protocols that our team has done a phenomenal job of implementing. I'm so proud of our medical team, of our coaches, of our student athletes, and of our staff, of really embracing the protocols that were necessary to keep us safe in this training time. And we'll continue with that. We will make those opportunities available for the student athletes who choose to stay.
Yeah, hey there, Rob. You got me?
I got you. You're
Sorry,
good.
I know that everyone's asking you that. And just to kind of piggyback off that last question, you said they can stay on campus. Is there a certain amount of time they can still practice going forward? I know everything's kind of pretty fluid right now, of course, just hearing about the postponement earlier in the week. But how long can they continue practice and also obviously working out at facilities too?
Yeah, some of that will continue to be defined as the NCAA determines, but the direction that we've been given at this point is they can stay in the status they were in before this decision was made. So in the sport of football, they were in the 20 hours that includes some walkthroughs, some strength training, as well as some film review. Men's and women's basketball were in their summer 8 hours of CARA. Obviously, volleyball and soccer were kind of moving into their preseason training. So our student athletes will still have the opportunity to get into the weight room again in a socially distanced with masks and do some of the individual instruction that they were doing. We are not moving to full practice in any sport. So no contact, no full practice in any sport, but they can kind of stay status quo in the training and the individual instruction for now.
Okay, next we'll have AJ McCord.
Awesome. Okay, so I was having some audio issues at the beginning, so I'm really sorry if I even asked either of these questions, Rob. Feel free to totally pass over them. The first question is, I've talked to several of the players who are in, part of that Players United group, and they talked about how much they want to make sure that the demands and requests that they had before the Pac-12 decided to postpone their season were still being talked about. I know that's with the conference, but how much do you anticipate working with the players and athletes of that group over the next couple of months to make sure that if and when football can resume, these players feel safe to do so? And then secondarily, you talked about the budget cuts. Have you ruled out cutting any sports? And you may have answered that. So those are my two questions.
So second question first is, that would be our last resort. I mean, obviously, we're a small athletic program with 20 sports, and our goal would be to continue those 20 sports. And we'll do everything that we can to keep those. On the first part of the question, the Pac-12 has had an ongoing dialogue with the We Are United group, and that dialogue will continue. I think it's probably been reported that Commissioner Scott sent a response to them last night. And again, I want to say again that I've said several times, health and safety is our highest priority, and that was the driver in the decision to postpone all competitions through the calendar year. And that health and safety will still be the driver of all of our decisions.
All right, next we will go to Eric Scopel.
Hey, Rob, can you hear me?
Gotcha.
Hey, I guess I'm curious. A lot of the focus is obviously on football, but other sports directly impact. You just talked about trying to avoid cutting those sports. What kind of conversations, though, do you have with maybe winter and spring sports here who are or maybe kind of feel like they might be in a little bit of limbo here, not knowing exactly what the future holds?
Well, we had a Zoom with all of our coaches shortly after the Pac-12 announcement to take any questions and really give them the latest information that was available. One of the things that's most difficult for our student athletes is the anxiousness, the uncertainty. Our goal all along for our staff, for our student athletes, and for our coaches is to provide as much information, to over-communicate, to make sure that we're doing the best that we can to alleviate what uncertainty that we can. So what we do share is what we can do right now. And those student athletes who've already been onboarded can stay in the training phase that they were in before this decision. We won't onboard any other student athletes until classes start. But once classes start, we'll see where we are from a protocol standpoint, and then create some opportunities for those student athletes to do what's permissible in a safe, likely socially distanced, masked way with our safety protocols in place. But we'll be having ongoing dialogue with all of our coaches, with our student athletes. Those coaches will have ongoing dialogue with their sport groups within the Pac-12, getting them the latest and most up-to-date information that we can.
A lot of talk with bubbles with, I guess, professional athletics, but now college. Do you support the idea? Do you think it's feasible for, obviously football couldn't probably do it, but the sports with fewer players, personnel attached to them, do you think a bubble could work in college athletics? Is that something that you are exploring even the idea of?
Well, I mean, our student athletes are students first.
Right.
So they're college students, which is different than professional sports. What I'll say is this, Matt, is our student athletes, football included, that were here over the summer that we onboarded did a phenomenal job. And our testing results show that. They really embraced the protocols, the culture that our coaches have built. Mario's done a phenomenal job. Our medical team did an amazing job. And our student athletes really embraced and understood what it would take to really stay safe and give us the best chance of advancing through what went to voluntary workouts, then expanded to more meetings, and some walkthroughs. And they were all on board. That's one of the things that was most difficult to deliver this news of postponement is our coaches and student athletes did absolutely everything that we asked of them. But college sports is different than professional sports, and they have to be students first.